Hi again, my dears. Tonight's story follows Georgie Flynn, a broke 24-year-old who writes greeting cards for a living and has never in her life been the most important person in a room, and Anouk Vasseur, the cold, exact woman who runs a 200-year-old glassworks and who, at 6 in the morning at gate 27, looked a gate agent in the eye and said Georgie was her wife. What begins as a lie, told to keep a stranger on a plane, slowly becomes a story about being chosen out loud, and about how the most careful woman in the world learns that some things break if you cool them too fast. The gate agent had already said my name twice, in the voice people use for bad news they didn't cause. Flynn, Georgina Flynn. There were 11 of us standing at gate 27 with the specific posture of people who have been told the plane is full and are trying not to be the one who cries about it. I had a boarding pass printed at a library. I had a suitcase held shut with a luggage strap I'd bought for £4. I had in the front pocket of my jacket a small brass envelope on a ribbon because I had won an award, and I had been too proud of it to pack it. Miss Flynn, I'm very sorry. We've had to reaccommodate. I have to be in Montreal tomorrow, I said. My voice came out wrong, higher. I know everyone says that. I know I sound like everyone, but I actually do. The next available seat is Thursday. Thursday? The fare opened Wednesday. The prize was the flight and the flight only, and the flight was leaving in 20 minutes without me on it. And I was going to have to phone my sister and say the thing out loud, and my sister was going to be kind about it, which was the worst possible outcome. That was when the woman in the black coat stopped walking. She had come out of the priority lane, which is a phrase I want you to hear the way I heard it. The lane where people move as if there is no such thing as a queue. Tall, very straight-backed, blue-black hair cut blunt at the chin, not a strand of it undecided. A charcoal black wool coat that had never once been rained on by accident. She stopped 4 feet from the desk and she looked at me. Not the desk, me. And then she went completely still. I would learn, later, what that stillness was. At the time, I thought she'd forgotten something at security. "There is a seat," she said. The gate agent's whole face changed. "Madame Vasseur, your companion's seat is—" "Yes," she said, 2B. And then she said it. Not loudly. She never did anything loudly. "She's with me." I opened my mouth. I have written 400 greeting cards. I have written condolences for pets, for divorces, for a woman whose husband ran away with a caravan. I could not, in that moment, produce one word. "Ma'am, I'll need the name to match the reservation." The woman in the black coat did not blink. Her index finger tapped once against her thumb, one small, precise movement, like a decision being filed. "Georgina," she said. "She's my wife." Quick note before we begin. If you want the hotter, uncensored version of stories like this, I share them on my Patreon, GL After Hours. The link's in the description for whenever you want to stay a little longer inside the story. Let me back up. 2 weeks before gate 27, I was made redundant by a woman named Cheryl who cried harder than I did. I want to be fair to Cheryl. She had to let 3 of us go, and she did it one at a time in a meeting room with a broken blind, and she used the phrase restructuring the sentiment department, which is genuinely what our department was called. Sentiment. 2nd floor, Bristol, above a carpet showroom. 11 of us wrote every card the company sold, and I wrote the hard ones, not birthdays. Anybody can write a birthday. I wrote sympathy. I wrote thinking of you at this difficult time. I wrote the card you buy when your friend's mother dies and you have known each other 19 years and you still don't have the sentence. I was good at it. That is not a brag. It's closer to a diagnosis. I could not tell a woman at a bus stop that I liked her coat, but give me 4 inches of cardstock and somebody else's grief, and I would put the exact words in your hand. I kept a notebook for the ones that never got used. Small, brown, the corners gone soft, an elastic band round the middle because the spine went years ago. Half-finished lines. Things too true for retail. Nobody warns you that the worst part is the ordinary hours. I keep setting out 2 cups. I'm not going to say she is in a better place because you would have to be a monster to think anywhere is better than the kitchen with you. That last one got me a letter from a woman in Carlisle. Cheryl framed the letter. Then Cheryl restructured me. 9 days after that, I got an email with the subject line, "Congratulations, a golden envelope. Sympathy and condolence under 30." And I laughed for about 4 seconds, and then I sat down on the floor of my flat and read it 11 times. I had won. There is an award. It is a small brass envelope on a ribbon, and it is given out at the Montreal Paper and Sentiment Fair. And the prize is a return flight and 3 nights in a hotel with a shared bathroom on the 7th floor. My sister Nessa said, Georgie, you won a prize. It's a very small industry, I said. You won a prize for making sad people feel held, you absolute idiot. Put it on the fridge. So I went. I spent my last real money on the luggage strap and a bag of boiled sweets for the plane. And I stood at gate 27 at 6:10 in the morning being reaccommodated to Thursday. And a stranger in a black coat told an airline I was her wife. Here is the part I think about most. She did not look at me for confirmation. Every liar I have ever met looks at you. They check. There's a flick of the eyes that says, back me up. She didn't do it. She said the sentence, and then she waited, entirely still, with the enormous patience of someone who has never once had to repeat herself. And the gate agent typed, and the printer made the small hungry noise printers make, and a boarding pass came out with my name on it, and the number 2B. Thank you, I said to the agent, because I am English and I will thank a machine. Come, said the woman in the black coat. I came. I want to tell you I asked questions in the jet bridge. I asked 1. Are we married? No. Right, I said. Good. Great. Because I'd have remembered. I've got a very good memory for admin. She did not answer. Down the bridge, past the door, into a part of a plane I had genuinely believed was decorative. 2 seats, 2 of them, side by side, with a table between them and a small flower in a metal holder. An actual flower on an aeroplane at dawn. That's mine, I said. That's a bed. It reclines. It's a bed, it's got a duvet. There is a pillow with a corner turned down. Sit down, please, said the woman in the black coat. Before the crew decide I have married a person who cannot operate a seatbelt. I sat down. Somewhere over my own head, in a voice I did not recognize as mine, I said, I'd like it noted that I can operate a seatbelt. And that, right there, 11 minutes into an 8-hour flight to Montreal, was the first time I saw the corner of her mouth move. 1 millimeter. Maybe less. I would spend the next 5 days trying to make it happen again. Her name was Anouk Vasseur, and she was 37 years old, and she told me neither of those things. I got the name off the crew, who used it like a small ceremony every time they came near her, Madame Vasseur. And I got the age much later, from a woman who should not have told me. What I got in the first hour, I got by looking, because looking was free, and I had nothing else to do with my hands. She had amber eyes, not brown. I want to be precise about this because I was precise about it at the time, in a way that alarmed me. Brown eyes go dark in low light. Hers took the reading lamp and held on to it, like something poured and left to set. Her skin was very fair with no warmth in it at all, the way porcelain is not warm. Blue-black hair cut blunt at the chin, and she never touched it once, not once in 8 hours, whereas I touched mine approximately every 90 seconds like a woman checking her house is still there. She had a watch on her left wrist, plain, old, and she did not look at it either. She looked at nothing. She sat with her hands in her lap, and she was still in a way that I found honestly slightly upsetting. I fidget. I have a whole body of unnecessary movements. She had about 4 movements in total, and she spent them carefully. And on the handle of her bag, when the crew stowed it, there was a leather luggage tag, old, soft as a glove, stamped in the corner with 2 letters, an O and a V. Anouk Vasseur would be an A. I noticed. I did not say anything for 6 hours. You're going to ask, she said, 40 minutes into the flight. I'm absolutely going to ask. Ask then. Why did you say I was your wife? Anouk Vasseur turned her head and looked at me properly for the first time, and I discovered that being looked at properly by her was a physical event, like standing up too fast. Because she's with me was not going to be enough, she said, and I did not have time to invent something better. That's not why. No, she agreed. It is not. And then she took a magazine out of the seat pocket and read it, cover to cover, including the map of destinations at the back, which nobody has ever read, which I know because I have looked for a witness my whole life. Here is what I did with the next 6 hours since we're being honest. I ate everything. I would like to defend myself and I can't. There was a menu. On an aeroplane. There was a small dish of warm nuts and I said, "Are these free?" out loud to a member of staff. And Anouk Vasseur did not look up from her magazine, but something happened in her shoulders that I chose to interpret as respect. I filled in 4 pages of the notebook. I did that thing you do at altitude where you become briefly convinced you are a philosopher. I wrote the kindness of strangers is mostly just having a spare seat and then crossed it out, because it wasn't true, and because a much worse and much better line had turned up underneath it, and I was not ready for it. I watched 40 minutes of a film about a submarine and cried at it. At the bit where the sonar man says goodbye to his brother, I made a sound. A real one. And a hand came into the edge of my vision holding a folded paper napkin and did not comment and went away. I did not sleep. She did for about an hour. And I would like to report something tender. And instead, I have to report that she slept exactly like a woman lying down for a portrait. On her back, hands folded, breathing so quietly that at one point I leaned over to check, and she opened her eyes and said, "I am alive, Georgina." And I said, "Brilliant, great, carry on," and lay back down with my whole face on fire. The turbulence came in over the ice. It wasn't bad. I've been told since that it wasn't bad. The cabin lights came up and the crew sat down and the plane did that thing where the floor stops being a promise. And I got both hands round the armrests and said, entirely calmly, "Oh, no thank you, Georgina. I'm fine, I'm great, I'm a lovely flyer. You have gone the color of the napkin." That's my normal color. The plane dropped again, and I made a decision I have never regretted and never fully recovered from. I let go of the armrest, and I put my hand, palm down, flat on the table between us, because it was the closest thing to solid ground I could reach. I did not touch her. I want that clear. I put my hand on the table like a woman laying a hand on a wall to check the house is standing. And Anouk Vasseur, without looking at me, without a word, put her own hand down on the table beside mine. Not on it. Beside it. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of the back of her hand along the side of my little finger. And no closer for 11 minutes, until the seatbelt sign went off. Then she picked up her magazine again. I want you to understand that I have written professionally, for money, about human comfort, 400 cards. And I sat there, at 38,000 feet over the Labrador Sea with my hand on a table next to the hand of a woman whose first name I had learned from a stewardess. And I could not have told you what had just been given to me. I only knew I would be looking for it again for the rest of my life. "2 letter," I said, an hour out of Montreal. She turned a page. "On your bag, an O and a V, you're an A." The page stopped turning. "You've been holding that for 6 hours, said Anouk Vasseur. 5.5. I had the nuts." She closed the magazine. She put it back in the pocket. She squared it, actually. She straightened the edge with one finger so it sat flush, and I filed that away with the rest of it. "Odile Vasseur," she said. "My grandmother." Is that her bag? It was her tag. I have moved it 4 times to 4 bags. A beat. She dislikes waste. Dislikes. Present tense. I heard it, and I did the arithmetic, and I got it wrong, the way you do. "Is she meeting you?" I said. "At the airport?" And Anouk Vasseur looked out of the window at the cloud, which had gone the color of a dirty window, and said, "No, she has not left the house since March," which is when I should have asked the second question. I didn't. I asked something stupid instead. I asked what she did for a living, and she said glass, and I said like windows. And she said, like windows, in a tone that I now know meant like cathedrals, you absolute pigeon. And the seatbelt sign came on for landing. Montreal came up out of the cloud, gray and wet and enormous, and the wheels came down, and I got my notebook out and wrote the line that had been waiting underneath the crossed-out one for 6 hours. Somebody said my name in front of strangers, as if it belonged to her. I looked at it. I put the elastic band back around the notebook. I thought, that's not a card, nobody's buying that. I was wrong about that too, as it turns out. But we'll get there. The thing about arrivals halls is that everybody in them is telling the truth. It's the last honest room in the world. People are crying and running and holding up bits of cardboard with names on. You cannot arrive somewhere and pretend you don't care. I came out behind Anouk Vasseur with my suitcase and its 4-pound strap, and I was mid-sentence. I was saying so genuinely thank you, and if you ever need a card written for anything ever. When she stopped dead. There were 3 people at the barrier. A young woman, 19 or so, in a puffer jacket much too big for her, holding a sign that said, "A Vasseur," in beautiful hand lettering, with a small drawing of a bee in the corner, a man in a driver's coat, and, in front of them both, a woman of about 45 in a caramel trench coat with a silk scarf tied the way you tie it when you have practiced, whose smile arrived before her eyes did. "Anouk," said the woman in the trench coat. "Chérie, you look tired." Then her eyes moved in one long slide, from Anouk's face to mine, to my jacket, to my suitcase, to the 4-pound strap. "And who is this?" I have gone over the next 4 seconds many times. Anouk Vasseur did not look at me. She did not check. She did not do the flick. She went completely still, and then her index finger tapped once against her thumb. "Renee," she said, "this is Georgina." And then, in the honest room, to her family, with nobody's boarding pass at stake, "She's with me." Her name was Renee Corbeau, and she was married to a Vasseur cousin. And she had, I would learn, spent 9 years being almost family, in a family that measures everything. "With you," Renee repeated. "Yes, with you as in, Renee." Anouk picked up my suitcase, off the floor of the arrivals hall, in her black coat, with the strap trailing. "It is a long drive and Meme sleeps at 8. The girl in the puffer jacket lowered the sign. She was looking at me with her whole face, entirely undisguised, the way people do at 19, and she mouthed, "I swear this happened." She mouthed hi at me and did a tiny wave with 2 fingers. I mouthed hi back. That was Bijou Tremblay, who everyone called B, and she was the 2nd-year apprentice at the Verrerie Vasseur, and within 4 days she would be the only person in the province of Quebec who knew the truth, and she would keep it. And she would be 19 years old.
If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe so the next one can find you. Stay close.
We got as far as the car park before I said anything. So that was, "Get in the car, please." "Right, no, absolutely, it's just that I've got a hotel on Sherbrooke with a shared bathroom and a fare on Wednesday, which is..." Georgina. She had stopped by the boot of the car with my suitcase in her hand, and the rain was doing the thing rain does in a car park, coming sideways off the concrete, and she looked at me. And for the first time since gate 27, she did not look like a woman who had never had to repeat herself. She looked like a woman standing at the edge of something with her shoes already wet. "I am going to ask you for something absurd," said Anouk Vasseur, "and you are going to want to say no. Please do it in the car. It is raining, and my grandmother is dying and I have not slept." I have been asked for things all my life in the ordinary way. "Can you cover Saturday? Can you write one for a stillbirth? Sorry, I know. Can you not make a fuss about the money this month?" Nobody had ever handed me the whole thing at once like that, wet through in a car park, at 7 in the evening in a country I'd been in for 40 minutes. "Okay," I said. The drive was 2 hours north, and it got dark in the first 30 minutes. I'd like to describe Quebec in autumn to you properly, because I did not have the words at the time, and I have collected some since. Imagine a country that has decided to spend everything it has. All of it, all at once, no saving. Whole hillsides of maple gone red as a struck match, birches the yellow of the inside of a lemon, and then long black stretches of pine where the headlights make a tunnel and you cannot see out. 6 weeks, she said, somewhere in the pines. That is what the doctor says. Perhaps 8. I'm sorry. She is 86. She has been threatening to die since she was 71, largely as a negotiating tactic. A pause. She is not negotiating now. I looked at her hands on the wheel. 10 and 2, absolutely 10 and 2. 2 years ago, Anouk said, at a dinner in that house, my aunt and Renee and a notary and 2 men from the Corbeau side of the family sat at a table and discussed which of them I should marry. Sorry, discussed? The Verrerie has been in my family since 1809. It makes almost no money. It is worth a great deal on paper and nothing in the bank. There is a Corbeau cousin who is unmarried and reasonable and would fold the glassworks into their holdings within a year and put a shop in the annealing room. And you were meant to... I was meant to be sensible. Her voice did not change at all. That was the thing about her voice. It never changed. And after a while, that stopped being coldness and started being the sound of somebody carrying something heavy up a staircase without setting it down. My grandmother was at that table. She is 86 and she was born in the house and she has led the crack in every broken window in 3 provinces. And she sat there while they discussed me like an inheritance tax problem. What did you do? I said I was already married. I did not say anything. I said her name was Georgina, said Anouk Vasseur to the windscreen at 90 kilometers an hour in the dark. Because it was the name of a woman in a book my grandmother read to me when I was 6. It was the first name that came. And Meme put down her fork and she laughed for the first time in a year and she said, "Good, at last, bring her at Christmas." The pines went past. The headlights made their tunnel. And you didn't, I said. There were reasons every year. A furnace repair. A commission. Her hip. Anouk's finger tapped once against the wheel. She asked for you on Tuesday, by name. She is dying, and she asked for the woman I invented. And I flew to London on Thursday to see a supplier I did not need to see. Because I could not sit in that house and be asked again, she indicated. There was nobody behind us for 40 kilometers, and she indicated. And at gate 27, said Anouk Vasseur. An airline said your name out loud. I want to tell you that I thought about it. 5 days, I said. The fare's Wednesday to Friday, and honestly, the fare is 4 folding tables in a hotel basement. I looked at the photographs from last year. There's a man who sells envelopes and he has a cousin who sells envelopes and they don't speak. 5 days. And then I go and get my brass envelope and I go home. You are agreeing. I'm agreeing. You have not asked what it involves. You're going to tell me it involves lying to a dying woman, I said. And I'm going to tell you that I have written 400 sympathy cards, Madame Vasseur, and not one of them was the truth. Not one. The truth is, this is unbearable, and there is nothing I can do about it. What you buy for £2.40 is somebody standing next to you while it's unbearable. That's the whole job. That's all any of it is. The car went quite a long way in the dark. Anouk, she said. Sorry? You said Madame Vasseur. My grandmother will notice within 1 minute. Her eyes stayed on the road. It is Anouk. Anouk, I said. Yes, Anouk? You do not have to test it for structural faults. It will hold. 3 rules, laid out at a crossroads with the indicator ticking and nobody coming. 1. I would say we married in London, in a registry office, in March, with 2 witnesses off the street, because that was small and gray and unglamorous and therefore believable, and because Meme had once said the only honest wedding is one nobody photographs. 2. I would not lie about myself, not one thing. My job, my sister, the carpet showroom, the redundancy, the brass envelope on a ribbon, all of it true. She reads people the way she reads glass, Anouk said. Give her one false thing, and she will find the hole to seam. 3. And she said this one at the very end, in a completely different voice, quiet, quick, like a woman putting something down before she can be talked out of it. You may leave at any hour. You do not owe me the 5 days. If you want to go, you say so, and I will drive you to the airport at 3 in the morning, and I will not ask you a single question. That's a strange rule. It is the only one that matters, said Anouk Vasseur. The house at Lac Brumeau was white-clappered and 200 years old, and it had a red tin roof and 1 lit window on the ground floor, and behind it, down the slope, there was a long, low building with a chimney and a dull orange glow behind the glass. And even from the drive you could feel it, the heat of the thing, like a held breath. That's the works? That is the works. It's on, at 9 at night. A glass furnace runs at 1100 degrees, said Anouk, taking my suitcase out of the boot before I could reach it. It has not been off since 1974. If it goes off, we lose 4 months and a great deal of money, and my grandmother would hear about it from her bed and get up. Bee was on the porch with the sign still under her arm. Hi, she said. Hello, I'm B. I'm the apprentice. I lettered your sign. Did you see the bee? I saw the bee. The bee was excellent. I know. She held the door. She's awake. She waited. She's been asking since 6. The room smelled of lemon and warm dust and something underneath both of it that I recognized and could not name for 2 days, and then did name at 3 in the morning and lay there staring at the ceiling. It smelled like the inside of a church. Odile Vasseur was very small in a very large bed, white hair, thin as smoke, brushed and pinned, hands on top of the covers, and the hands were the part you couldn't look away from. Enormous knuckles, 2 fingers crooked, the back of the left one marked with a burn scar the shape of a comma. She looked at her granddaughter for 1 second, then she looked at me for 11. Come here, said Odile Vasseur. I came. I sat where she pointed, on a chair that had been put beside the bed at exactly the distance a chair gets put when somebody has been sitting in it a great deal. You are Georgina. Georgie, mostly. Georgina, she decided. Anouk. Go and look at the furnace. There is something wrong with the door, and Mark has been lying to me about it for a week. Meme, go and look at the furnace, chérie. And Anouk Vasseur, who had told an airline what to do, and told a family what to do, and told me to get in a car, said, yes, and went. The door shut. I was alone in a warm room with a dying woman who thought I was married to her granddaughter, and I had been in the country for 4 hours. So, said Odile Vasseur. March, a registry office, 2 witnesses off the street. Yes. Was it raining? I thought about the honest answer, and the honest answer was that I had never been married in my life, and so I gave her the only true thing I had, which was the weather in London in March. It rained in the morning, I said. It stopped about 2. Then it came back at 4 and got everybody on the way home. Odile Vasseur nodded slowly, as if I had passed something. And what do you do, Georgina? I write greeting cards. I wrote sympathy cards mostly. I was made redundant a fortnight ago by a woman called Cheryl, who cried more than I did, and I've come here because I won an award for it. It's a small brass envelope on a ribbon. It's in my jacket because I was too proud of it to put it in the case. There was a silence. Show me, said Odile Vasseur. So I got it out, and I put it in that enormous scarred hand, and she turned it over twice and held it up against the lamp, the way, I did not know this yet, the way you hold a piece of glass to find the flaw. Sympathy, she said. Yes, for strangers, for people who don't have the sentence yet. The old woman closed her hand round my award, and then she said the thing that I have carried around ever since, the thing that told me exactly what kind of house I had walked into. My granddaughter has not had the sentence since she was 11 years old, said Odile Vasseur. Her mother left in the summer, and her father sat in that kitchen for 4 years and said, fine, whenever anybody asked him anything. Fine, fine. He was not fine. He was in pieces, and he taught her the whole trick. You hold very still, and you say the short word, and nobody asks again. She handed me back the brass envelope. You are the first person she has brought into this house in 19 years. I do not care what you did in a registry office in the rain. Do you understand me? I think so. You do not, she said, with enormous kindness. But you will. Tell me about the 4-pound strap on your suitcase. I saw it from the window. There was one guest room. Obviously, there was one guest room. There is a God, and she writes for a small imprint. There is a sofa, Anouk said in the doorway, looking at the bed the way a general looks at a bridge. You're not sleeping on a sofa in your own house. It is my grandmother's house. You're not sleeping on a sofa in your grandmother's house. You flew to London and back in 6 days, and you did all of it in that coat. I sat down on the very edge of the mattress, on the side nearest the door, and put my hands on my knees like a woman at a job interview. There's a whole spare. Look, there's an entire. How many pillows does one bed need? Georgina, I'm building a wall. You are building a wall out of my grandmother's cushions. I'm building a modest wall, I said, out of available materials. And in the morning I'll take it down and nobody has to know that I once, briefly, at the age of 24 in Canada, made a fortification out of soft furnishings. Anouk Vasseur stood in the door and looked at the wall. "There is a linen cupboard on the landing," she said. "The good cushions are in there." Which is how, at 11 at night, we built it together. I did not sleep for a long time. And here is what I heard. I heard the house being 200 years old. I heard once very faintly the furnace shift and settle down the slope, like something enormous rolling over. I heard Anouk Vasseur breathing 4 cushions away, and I knew from the quality of it that she was not asleep either, and neither of us said anything for about 40 minutes, which was, I think, the most intimate 40 minutes of my life to that point. And then, in the dark, in exactly the voice she had used about the registry office, "Thank you." "For the wall?" "For the arrivals hall," said Anouk Vasseur. "You could have said one word and I would have had nothing." I lay there with my heart going like a bird in a bin. "You didn't check," I said. "I am sorry?" "At the gate, and at the barrier. You didn't look at me to see if I'd back you up. Everybody looks." A very long pause. "No," she said. "I did not." "Why not?" And Anouk Vasseur said, "Go to sleep, Georgina." And I did, eventually, at about 4. And when I woke up, the wall was still there, but her side of it was cold and made, and downstairs somebody was making coffee wrong on purpose, so I would come down and complain about it. On the second day, she took me to the glass. You go down the slope on a path made of 180 years of broken glass trodden into the mud, and it glitters. It actually glitters. A whole path of failures shining in the wet. And then the door, and the heat comes out at you like a hand on the chest. "Oh," I said. "Yes." There were sheets of colored glass standing in racks along the whole east wall, upright like books, and the morning came through them and put 100 colors down on the concrete floor, and Bee was on her knees in the middle of it all with a strip of lead in her teeth like a pirate. "Morning," she said around the lead. "Bee, take that out of your mouth. Mark does it. Mark has been doing it for 40 years and has the teeth of a man who does it." The furnace door was open a hand's width, and inside it was the color of the inside of a sun. And I stood there in my green corduroy jacket, in a 200-year-old glassworks in Quebec, and I thought, with total clarity, I am going to have to write about this, and nobody is going to publish it. "What do you make?" I said. "Windows. Restoration mostly. Churches, some civic work, the odd house that has more money than sense." Anouk had put on a leather apron, and she was different in it, faster, her hands doing 4 things instead of none. "There is a church in Trois-Rivières whose east window has been in a crate since 1998, because no one alive could match the blue." "And you matched the blue?" "Mémé matched the blue," she said. "In 2003, on a Tuesday. She did it by eye, from memory, in one afternoon, and then she cried about it in the annealing room where she thought no one could hear her. And then she came out and said the batch was acceptable. She lifted a small square of that blue out of the rack and held it up against the window. And I want you to know that the sky came through, it changed. Not bluer, deeper, like the sky had been thinking about something. That's her blue? That is her blue. Anouk, I said, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And she went completely still, and did not say anything at all for so long that Bee looked up from the floor. The lecture came on the 3rd morning, and I have thought about it every week since. There is a room at the far end of the works called the annealing room, and it is the least dramatic room in the building. No fire, no color, just a long insulated tunnel like a bread oven laid on its side, and a chart on the wall in pencil, and a stool. "This is where the work is," said Anouk. "It's a corridor. It is a corridor that decides everything." She put her hand flat on the top of the layer, and the whole shape of her changed, the way people change when you get them onto the one subject. When glass comes off the fire, it is 1,000 degrees. If you put it on a bench in this room, it will look perfect, beautiful, finished. You could photograph it. And in 9 days it will crack on its own in the dark, and no one will have touched it. Her thumb moved once along the metal. The outside cools faster than the inside. So the outside sets, and the inside is still moving, and it pulls against itself until it fails. It does not shatter in front of you. That is the cruelty of it. It waits until you have stopped worrying. So what do? You bring it down slowly, said Anouk Vasseur. 12 hours, sometimes 3 days for a large piece. You do not comfort it, and you do not rush it. You take the heat out 1 degree at a time, and you do not open the door to look. I stood in a gray corridor in a leather apron 3 sizes too big, and I said, "That sounds like the hardest part of the entire job." "It is the only part that cannot be repaired later," she said. "Everything else can be re-leaded." And then she looked at me, one of those looks that arrives about a second and a half too late to be casual, and she said, "You are writing this down." "I'm not. You are writing it in your head. Your hand moved." "Anouk," I said, "you have just given me the best line about grief I have heard in 4 years of being paid to have them, and you gave it to me about ovens. It is not about grief. It's completely about grief." "It is about glass," said Anouk Vasseur, and walked out, and 40 minutes later came back and put a cup of coffee down beside my notebook without a word. The third day was also the day Renée Corbeau came for lunch. She came with a tart and a tone. She kissed me on both cheeks and told me my jacket was charming, in the voice a woman uses when she means it is charming that you own it. "And where did you two meet?" "A shop," I said, because Anouk and I had agreed on almost nothing beyond March in the rain, and because it was true. A shop is where I have met every good thing in my life. "A shop!" "A stationer's," said Anouk from the sink, not turning round. She was buying card. I was buying nothing. "You were buying nothing?" "I had gone in to get out of the rain." I stared at the back of her head. That was not a rule we had made. That was invented on the spot, out of nowhere, in the specific voice of somebody who has thought about it. And I thought, with the strangest lurch, she's better at this than she should be. "How romantic," said Renée. "And what is it that you do, Georgina, in London?" "Bristol. I write greeting cards. I got made redundant a fortnight ago." There was a small, delighted silence. I have learned to hear that silence. It is the sound of somebody putting an item in a drawer to use later. "Well," said Renée Corbeau, "how refreshing. You know, the family had almost given up hope. There was a great deal of talk about who Anouk would settle with, and there were some very sensible options, and then..." She gestured at me with a cake slice, generously, as if awarding something. "You." "Renée," said Odile Vasseur from her chair by the window, where she had been for an hour with a blanket and her eyes shut, and, as it turned out, all of her hearing. "The tart is dry." "Fourth day. This is the one I would keep, if I only got one." The church at Trois-Rivières had finally paid, and the east window came out of its crate, and there was no room for it anywhere except the floor of the main hall. So we laid it out down there on trestles and blankets. 9 panels, 140 years old, a hole in it the shape of a hockey puck, because in 1998 a boy threw a stone. I spent 9 hours on my knees with a soft brush and a bowl of distilled water, cleaning 140 years of church breath off the coat of a saint, while Anouk cut Mémé's blue to fit a hole a dead boy's stone had made. B sang, badly, continuously, in 2 languages. Here is what I catalogued that day in a notebook I still have, that she pushed her hair behind her ear with the back of her wrist, never her fingers, because her fingers were always dirty. That there was a burn scar on the inside of her left forearm, old, about the length of a matchstick. That when she was concentrating, her mouth went completely straight, and when she solved something, the corner of it moved, 1 millimeter, exactly the same millimeter as gate 27, and that I had begun, without deciding to work for that millimeter the way other people work for money. That her coffee went cold every single time, every time. She poured it, she put it down, she forgot it existed, and at about 4 o'clock, she would drink it cold in one go with a face like a woman taking medicine, and I would think I could just, and not say it. That she said my whole name, Georgina. Not once did she shorten it in 5 days, and by the 4th I had stopped correcting her, and by the 5th, the sound of it in her mouth did something to the back of my knees. At 6 o'clock, she stood up, put her hands in the small of her back, looked down at the saint I'd spent 9 hours on, and said, "You have very good hands." "They're card writer's hands. They're basically for cake." "No," said Anouk Vasseur. "You did not scrub. Everyone scrubs. You waited for it to lift." She rolled her sleeves down. Meme waited. Nobody else in this building waits. Then she went to check the lair, and I sat on the floor of a glassworks next to a cleaned saint with my whole chest full of something enormous and stupid. And I got out the notebook and wrote, I have been in this country for 4 days, and somebody said I have good hands. And I am going to remember that in a hospital one day, at the end, when I have forgotten my own address. Bea worked it out that night. She found me on the porch steps at 11:30, eating cereal out of a mug, which is a thing I do when I'm upset, and also when I'm happy, and also on Tuesdays. You're not married, said Bea. I put the mug down. Okay, I said. Right. What gave it? You don't know where the plates are. She sat down next to me, pulled her knees up. It's been 4 days and you still open the cupboard with the tins in it first. Every time. Nobody married to somebody opens the wrong cupboard for 4 days. She looked out at the Black Lake. Also, she doesn't know what you take in your coffee, and she asked me on Tuesday, in a way where she was pretending she wasn't asking. I'm not going to tell anyone, said Bijou Tremblay. God, obviously I'm not going to tell anyone. Renee's been in that house 9 years and she's already measured the annealing room for shelving. She came with a tape measure in her handbag in June. She scraped her heel on the step. Can I say something rude? You may as well. You've got about 9 days of paint left on you. Sorry? It's a glass thing. It's what Mark says about the cheap restoration guys. They use a paint that isn't fired, and it looks perfect. And it looks perfect for years, and then one wet spring it just walks off the glass. Bea shrugged. Everyone in this family lies for the family. Renee lies, the notary lies. Anouk's been lying for 2 years, and she's the most honest person I've ever met, which is its own whole problem. But you, she pointed at me with her chin, you're not lying for the family. You're lying because you like her. And that's a paint that comes off. I sat on a porch in Quebec at 11:30 at night and got read like a window by a 19-year-old with a bee tattooed on her hand. That's very rude, I said. I did warn you. You've reached the part where wanting turns into something more. If you want the hotter, uncensored GL scenes, they're on my Patreon, GL After Hours. Details in the description. Now, back to Georgie, who was about to find out that leaving on Wednesday had stopped being the simplest thing in the world. The rain came in on the 5th night and took the power out at 9:10. Not the works. The works has its own generator, because you do not leave 1100 degrees at the mercy of a hydro line. Just the house. Every light in it went at once, and the fridge stopped, and the silence after a fridge stops is a physical event. And upstairs, Meme's monitor beeped over to battery, and Bea shouted, "Generators on the house in 10, it's the road, it's always the road." So we lit the lamps. There are 11 oil lamps in that house because there have always been 11, and I carried the tray and Anouk did the wicks, and we went round the ground floor room by room like a pair of Victorians, and by the time we got to the last one, the little back room with the piano nobody plays, the rain was going at the window like it had a grievance. And I said, because I had had a glass and a half of something, and because I am me, you invented the stationers. The match went out. She lit another one. Yes, you said you'd gone in to get out of the rain. Nobody plans that. You made it up while you were washing a colander. I did. Why that? Anouk Vasseur put the glass funnel back on the lamp and adjusted the flame down to almost nothing, which is a thing she does, which is the whole of her in one gesture. She takes the heat out slowly. Because if I am going to lie to my grandmother, she said, it is going to be about paper and rain, and a woman who was already there. The rain did its thing at the window. Anouk. Yes. I'm not going to be able to leave on Wednesday and be fine about it. She went completely still. I have described that stillness 3 times now, and I want to make sure you have it exactly, because in that room, by one lamp turned down to nothing, I finally understood what it was. It was not coldness, and it was never coldness. It was a woman holding a piece of work absolutely level because she has been told her whole life that if she moves, it spills. No, she said. No, as in I am also not going to be fine about it. Her finger tapped once against her thumb. I have thought about this for 4 days in the annealing room, which is where I go to be a coward. And you are here because I said a name in an airport. said Anouk Vasseur. You are in this house because it was convenient to me. If I touch you, I do not know how to prove that it was not the plan. Anouk, I built a wall out of cushions on the first night. Yes. Do you know what I wrote in the notebook on the plane? Before I knew a single thing about you? Somebody said my name in front of strangers as if it belonged to her. I was standing about a foot away from her, in a dark room, and I could feel the lamp on the side of my face. I've spent 4 years writing the sentence for people too frightened to say it, and I'm going to say mine, and then you can do whatever you like with it. I don't want to go on Wednesday. For about 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then Anouk Vasseur crossed the foot of floor between us and put her hand along my jaw the way she picks up glass, as if the weight of it mattered, and kissed me. It was not a small kiss, and it did not hurry. Her thumb moved once at my cheekbone, and when she stopped, she did not step back, and her forehead came down against mine. And we stood in the back room with the rain going and the lamp turned down to nothing at all. 12 hours, I said, eventually, into about 2 inches of air. What? You said 12 hours, to bring something down slow. Georgina, I'm just saying I'd like it noted that I can be patient. I can. Ask anyone. Ask Cheryl. And Anouk Vasseur laughed. Out loud. One short, astonished sound, like something coming unstuck, and then she pressed her mouth to the corner of my eyebrow and said, Go to bed before I stop being sensible. And I went, and I did not sleep at all. And at about 2 a.m, I heard her go down the slope to the works, because that is where she goes. The Montreal Paper and Sentiment Fair was 4 folding tables in the basement of a hotel on Saint-Antoine, and it was, without any competition, one of the best afternoons of my life. There were 19 people. There was a man with envelopes, and 2 tables away, his cousin with envelopes, and they did not speak. And Anouk Vasseur, who had driven 2 hours, and was wearing the black coat in a hotel basement with a laminated banner, asked both of them detailed questions about paperweight until the cousin cried. They gave me the brass envelope on a ribbon. A woman called Pauline read out my line, the one about the 2 cups, off a card, badly, into a microphone that didn't work, and 19 people in a basement applauded, and one of them stood up. On the way out, I said, You didn't have to come. I know. You asked that man about grammage for 11 minutes. He was frightened, said Anouk. He has been coming for 6 years and nobody asks him anything. And I stopped on the pavement on Saint-Antoine with a brass envelope in my fist and thought, oh no, this is the real thing, isn't it? The notary came on Thursday at 10. His name was Fournier, and he had the particular apologetic dampness of a man who does other people's difficult work. And René Corbeau came with him in the caramel coat, and they set out papers on the kitchen table, and Anouk stood with her back to the sink and her arms folded and said almost nothing for 40 minutes. I was not supposed to be in the room. I was in the room because I had been sent to find a blanket, and because René said, brightly, No, stay, Georgina, it concerns you now, which should have been my first warning, and was in fact my third. The succession file, said Fournier. Madame Vasseur Sr.'s dispositions of 2019 amended in 2024. Amended, said Anouk. You have not read the amendment, said René. I have not. Then perhaps Georgina would like to? And René Corbeau turned one page of the document round on the table, with 2 fingers, so that it faced deliberately, slowly. The way you deal a card you have been holding all night. I read it. I want to be honest about the order in which I understood things, because the order is what did the damage. First, I understood the shape of the sentence, transmission of the Verrerie Vasseur in its entirety to Anouk Marie Vasseur, on condition that. Then I understood the condition. On condition that she be, at the date of the succession, established in a marriage, and the note in the margin, in a hand I already knew because it was on every chart in the annealing room. Because the works needs 2. It has always needed 2. Odile Vasseur. And then, last, in the kitchen of the house at Lac Brumeau, with a blanket over my arm, I understood the arithmetic. 6 weeks, perhaps 8. A woman who invented a wife 2 years ago. A grandmother who asked for her by name on a Tuesday. A flight to London on the Thursday. And at gate 27, out of 11 reaccommodated passengers, a girl with the right name on a boarding pass an airline said out loud. "Georgina," said Anouk. "How much is it worth?" I said. My voice came out very light and very pleasant. "The works on paper." Fournier looked at the ceiling. Renee said a number. "Right," I said. "Yes, that's a lot of folding tables." Georgina, "Did you know about the condition?" And Anouk Vasseur, who had never once lied to me and who was not going to start in a kitchen, went completely still and said, "Yes." Here's the thing about being handed the whole picture by somebody who is enjoying it. You don't get to think. Renee Corbeau had spent 9 years being almost family, and she had a tape measure in her handbag in June, and she gave me that page at the exact moment she knew I could not ask a single useful question in front of a notary. So I did the only thing available. "Congratulations on the amendment," I said to the room in the voice I use for retail. "It's a lovely condition, very traditional." And I put the blanket down on the back of a chair, and I went upstairs, and I packed a suitcase in 11 minutes, and I cried through 9 of them, which is a statistic I have checked twice and stand behind. Anouk came up when I was doing the strap. "It is not what you have decided it is." "Then say the other thing." Nothing. Silence. And a woman standing very straight in a doorway holding absolutely level a piece of work she had been told her whole life would spill. "Anouk, I am asking you, right now in this room, with the case open, say one sentence that isn't true about glass." Her finger tapped once against her thumb. "I cannot say it now," said Anouk Vasseur. "If I say it now, in this house, on this morning, with that page on the table, you will never know whether I meant it or whether I needed it. And you will be gentle about it. You will be gentle for the rest of your life, and I will watch you be gentle." Her voice did not change. It never changed. "I will not have that. Not with you. That's the coldest kind thing anyone's ever said to me." "Yes," she agreed. "I am aware of how I am built." "Then take me to the airport." And she said, "Yes." And she did not ask me a single question. Not one, for 2 hours. In the dark, at 90 kilometers an hour, 10 and 2 on the wheel, past the hillsides that had spent everything. That was Rule 3. She wrote it in a car on the first night before she had touched me, and she kept it on the worst morning of her year, and I sat in the passenger seat and hated her for keeping it. Montreal Trudeau, at 2:30 in the morning, is a cathedral for people who have got something wrong. I sat at gate 51 with a boarding pass I had paid for with the last of the prize money and a brass envelope in my jacket pocket, and I got the notebook out, and I could not write one word. 4 years, 400 cards, nothing. Then somebody sat down next to me hard enough to move the whole row of seats, and it was Bijou Tremblay, 19 years old, in a puffer jacket, out of breath, holding a document wallet in both hands like a woman carrying soup. "You drove Mark's truck," I said. "I drove Mark's truck." "B, you don't have a—" "I have a learner's, and I have driven it for 2 hours in the dark, and I am never doing it again. And my legs are actually shaking. Look." She shoved the wallet at me. Read it now, because I have to put this back in the office before 6, or Fournier will know it was me." There were 2 pages. The first was a letter to Maître Fournier, dated 8 days earlier, at 3:14 in the morning, on Verrerie Vasseur letterhead. The second was a form, renunciation, signed, in a hand I knew off every chart in the annealing room's ugly little sister, the one written by the granddaughter, Anouk Marie Vasseur. She had renounced the condition, all of it, in writing at 3 in the morning, 8 days earlier, which was the night of the lamps, the night of the rain, the night she went down the slope after she kissed me. She had written to the family notary and refused the conditional transmission of the glassworks, and directed that the Verrerie pass instead to the Corbeau line, and she had used 11 words that B had read about 40 times in a truck in the dark. "I will not be able to prove it otherwise. Take the works." "She gave it away," I said. "She gave it away 8 days ago," said B, and then she stood in the kitchen this morning and let Renee hand you that page and said yes like an idiot, because Fournier hadn't filed it yet, and she wasn't going to say I renounced 200 years of my family for you to a woman holding a blanket. B wiped her nose on her sleeve. She's the most honest person I've ever met, and she is so bad at this, Georgie. She is so incredibly bad at this. The board changed above us. Boarding, gate 51. I sat there with 2 pages in my hands and 11 words in my chest, and I understood all at once, standing at the far end of it, exactly what I had been given at 38,000 feet over the Labrador Sea, a hand put down on a table beside mine. Not on it, beside it. Close enough to feel and no closer, because she would rather I had no reason to doubt it. B, I said. How fast can Mark's truck actually go? We got back at 5:20 and the kitchen light was on, because of course it was, because she does not sleep. I came in with my suitcase and its 4-pound strap and my hair like a haystack and the renunciation in my hand. And Anouk Vasseur stood up out of her chair so fast that it went over behind her. And for 1 second, I saw her face with nothing at all held level on it. You are on the plane, she said. I got a better offer. Georgina, sit down, I said. Please, because I've written this and I've only got it once. She sat down, on the fallen chair. She picked it up first, obviously, and said it right, because she is who she is. I have spent 4 years, I said, writing sentences for people who could not say their own. I am extremely good at it, and it is the loneliest job in the world, and I have never once been on the other end of it. Nobody has ever said the hard thing to me, not my mother, not Cheryl, not one of the men I wasted my 20s being agreeable at. My voice went, a bit, in the middle, and I let it. And at gate 27, a stranger said my name out loud in front of 11 people who had been told they didn't matter, and she didn't check to see if I'd back her up. It was a lie. It was the first time in my life someone put me in the sentence instead of selling me one. I put the 2 pages down on the table between us, facing her, the way Renee had done it to me, except not like that at all. 8 days ago, you signed away the glass. 200 years, at 3 a.m, so that if you ever told me the truth, I'd have no reason to doubt it. Anouk Vasseur looked at the renunciation on her grandmother's kitchen table. Fournier is discreet, she said, and Bijou is going to be dismissed. Bijou is going to be promoted. She drove a truck on a learner's permit. Georgina. She put her hand flat on the pages, and then she looked up, and she said it at last, in the only voice she had, the level one, the one that never changed, the sound of a woman carrying something heavy up a staircase, and finally, setting it down. I did not need a wife. I needed to stop being the last one of us who was still holding still. You laughed at a submarine film on an aeroplane, and I have not been able to think properly since Tuesday of last week. I sat down on the floor. Not a decision. My legs did it. Say the other thing, I said. I am in love with you, said Anouk Vasseur, and I have no property, and my grandmother is dying upstairs, and I will not survive the winter if you get on a plane. Right, I said. Okay, yes, good, great. Georgina. I'm having a moment on the floor, Anouk. Give me 4 seconds. Renee Corbeau came back at 10 with Fournier because the amendment file needed a signature. And she was already talking as she came through the door about how sensible everyone was being and how the annealing room got wonderful light. Fournier put the papers out, and I stood up from Mémé's chair by the window with the blanket over my arm, the same blanket, I had never actually delivered it, and said, Before you start, I'm not her wife. The kitchen went very quiet. I met her 9 days ago at gate 27 at Heathrow when I was being bumped off a flight, and she told an airline I was, and I let her, and then I came here and fell in love with her in the annealing room like an absolute amateur. I looked at Fournier, who had gone the color of his own shirt. So the condition isn't met, and it was never met. And she'd already renounced it 8 days ago anyway, which you know because it's in your office in a green wallet. That document, said Fournier faintly, was not to be— And there's one more thing, said a voice from the doorway. Odile Vasseur was standing up. She was standing up in a dressing gown, holding the frame of the door with one enormous scarred hand, 86 years old, and 6 weeks from the end of it, and B was under her other arm taking most of her weight and grinning like a lunatic. Mémé. Sit down, Renée, said Odile Vasseur. The tarte was dry, and so is the amendment. She got herself into the room one shuffle at a time and lowered herself into her chair, and had to breathe for a while, and nobody in that kitchen dared help her. In 2024, I put a condition in my will because I had watched my son say fine in this kitchen for 4 years, and I did not want her to do it for 40. It was a bad instrument. I am a glassmaker, not a lawyer. I meant, do not be alone in it. The condition is a condition, said Renée. The condition is withdrawn, said Odile. Fournier, you will draw that up today, and you will file the renunciation in the bin. Then she turned her head slowly and looked at me across the kitchen with those flat assessing eyes that find the flaw in anything. Georgina, on the first night I asked you if it rained, and you told me about London in March, and I knew then. There is no registry office in England that opens on a Sunday, and you gave me a Sunday. Did I? You did. And I said nothing, because my granddaughter came into my house for the first time in 19 years with somebody standing next to her. Odile Vasseur put out her hand, and I gave her mine, and she held it in that ruined, enormous grip. I asked her for the woman she invented. She brought me the one she chose. Do you understand me now? Yes, I said. Yes, I think I do. Odile Vasseur died in February on a Sunday in the afternoon with the furnace running. I was there. Anouk was there, and B was there, and Mark came up from the works with his hat in his hands. And it was quiet, and it was not beautiful, and there is no card for it. I have looked. I have written 400, and I have looked. What I can tell you is that in the last week she made us take her down to the annealing room in a wheelchair with 3 blankets, and she put her hand flat on the top of the lair the way her granddaughter does. And she said the chart on the wall was in the wrong units and always had been. And she left the Verrerie Vasseur to Anouk. No condition. 1 line, in her own hand, which Fournier read out and had to stop in the middle of. To Anouk the works in the fire, because she waited for things to lift. The east window went into the church at Trois Rivières in April, 26 years after a boy threw a stone at it. I was on the scaffold. I had no business on the scaffold. I have a fear of heights and a talent for cake, and I was up there in a borrowed helmet holding the bottom edge of a 140-year-old panel, while Anouk Vasseur led it in a square of her grandmother's blue that had been matched by I, from memory, in one afternoon in 2003, by a woman who then went and cried about it where she thought nobody could hear. At 4 o'clock, the sun came round the west side of the building and went through it, and the whole church went the color of the sky thinking about something. Anouk, yes, you're crying. I am not. You are. You're actually, Georgina, said Anouk Vasseur. If you say one more word, I will put you off this scaffold. And then she held onto my wrist for about a minute and a half without saying anything at all, 40 feet up, in front of Mark, in front of B, in front of the priest. I still write the hard ones. I write them out of an office in a 200-year-old glassworks in Quebec, at a desk in the corner of the annealing room, because it is the warmest room in the building and because I am superstitious about it now. Cheryl sends work. There is a whole line, you may even have bought one, which is a strange thing to say to you, a line of cards that just have a sentence and nothing else on them. No flowers, no at this difficult time. The first one we sold said, I keep setting out 2 cups, and in the display window of the works, let it into a panel about the size of a book, in Mémé's blue, in Anouk's lid. There is another one. B did the lettering. It is the line I wrote at 38,000 feet over the Labrador Sea on the back of a page, in a notebook held together with an elastic band, before I knew a single thing about the woman in 2A. Somebody said my name in front of strangers, as if it belonged to her. One last thing, we flew to London in June for my sister's wedding, and Nessa put us at the top table and got the speech wrong on purpose so I would have to fix it. At the gate at Montreal Trudeau, Anouk handed me a small parcel wrapped in the brown paper they wrap glass in. Inside was a luggage tag. Leather, new, soft as a glove, stamped in the corner with 2 letters, a G and an F. "I have moved mémés 4 times, to 4 bags," said Anouk Vasseur. It seemed correct that there should be 2. I did not manage to say anything for a while, and then they called the flight, and there was one of those small, horrible moments at the desk, a system thing, an upgrade list, a name that hadn't loaded, and the agent looked up at the 2 of us and said, "I'm sorry, I've got the 1 seat here. Are you together?" I opened my notebook. She has written in it exactly once. 1 line, in pencil, in her ridiculous engineer's capitals, on the night after the scaffold, on the page where I'd run out. "You cannot cool it fast. 12 hours, sometimes 3 days. I'm not in a hurry, Georgina." I put the elastic band back round it. I took her hand. "Yes," I said, "she's with me."